Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Soul Talk. Leora Mandel. I'll be joined with Rabbi David Aaron after the break. Relationships are such a key factor in our life, in our well-being. They are such an important part of our day-to-day existence. And when we talk about relationships, there's so many kinds of relationships, but I think oftentimes the relationships that have the greatest potential for meaning also have the greatest potential for challenge. The relationships that potentially are most meaningful are the relationships where we really are close and connected between a husband and wife, between a parent and child, between siblings. Friendship also, the deeper the friendship, the more rewarding it can be, but oftentimes the more challenging and possibly hurtful we can experience in these very important relationships. And as much as relationships are such an important part of our life, I think we have not necessarily advanced greatly over time. Technology has advanced, but human relationships and all of the challenges, how to navigate them, how to enjoy the people in our lives and not get aggravated or get sidetracked by the potential challenges that can arise in any form of relationship is still something that as human beings we're struggling with. And this has been true for so long. If we look at the Torah, the beginning of the Torah has so many stories about the first families that were so significant within the Jewish history. And there's all about relationships and the challenges in these relationships. And sometimes we look at some of these relationships and the challenges that they had, and whatever challenges we have in our relationships, we might actually feel a bit better when we see the level and the extent of the problems that were created between siblings, between murder and between terrible jealousy and selling into slavery, and between the challenges that husbands and wives had. And I think the Torah is trying to let us understand that relationships, as important and they are, as key as they are, as fulfilling as they are, that naturally, there are oftentimes elements, core elements, the closer we are with living with other people, that really create huge challenges. I think it's a big part of what it is that we're here for. In fact, if we think about what it is that the commandments, the mitzvot that are in the Torah, there's commandments between us and God, and there's commandments between us and our fellow man. And it's like there's many commandments that affect us and our fellow man. And I think my understanding of this is that it goes to show that it's not just the relationship that we have with God that is the only reason that we're here, that a good part of what we're here for is to work on ourselves and work on the relationships we have with other human beings. The question is, when we are struggling, when we're having challenges with others in our life, how can we best navigate these relationships so that we will come out better and the relationship can get stronger, and that instead of the relationships leading us to feeling like we're not our best selves, that we can grow through the challenges of the relationship, develop the relationship even through its challenges to bring out its beauty. This is what I want to ask the Rabbi when we return Soul Talk, Rabbi David Aaron and Leora Mandel.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Soul Talk. This is Leora Mandel with Rabbi David Aaron. Rabbi Aaron, the Torah is all about instructions for life for us to learn from. And the whole beginning of the Torah is stories about significant families, stories of what happened to them and their journeys. But what's so interesting to me is that part of what we see in these stories, I think there's so much that's relatable and admirable and significant, but the challenges that the families have, the different kinds of family relationships. You have challenges that husbands and wives have between parents and children. Each child is so unique, and how to educate each child to follow in the path that you're hoping to follow in the values that you're hoping that they will follow through in life. And then there's the relationship between siblings themselves. And there's so much strife and challenge in these stories and the relationships of these family members. And in a sense, it's something that I feel like there's so much that we can relate to, because I think anybody who is alive, and we're all in relationships, even if some of our relationships are relatively easy, there's always going to be some challenging relationship. Maybe my parents are great, but I have challenges with my sibling, or I get along very well with my wife, but I don't have an easy relationship with my parents. There's always going to be somebody in our life with whom we have challenges And so my question is, how do we understand the challenges that the Torah is presenting to us in these family relationships? And how do we help learn from those relationships and those challenges to help ourselves resolve the challenges that we have in our relationships?
Yeah, that is a master key question. Well, first of all, we know that the fundamental principle of Torah life is ahavta l'recha kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. And love your neighbor as yourself. Actually, our sages tell us that the ultimate neighbor that you need to love as yourself is your spouse. And of course, from there, your family members, and then from there, community and concentric circles from there. And sometimes it's really easy to love the stranger because I'm not so close to them. It's really, the closer you are to people, or the closer they are to you, the more you step on each other's toes. And so it's much more challenging to love somebody that you're closer to and have a constant interaction with. And the Kabbalah teaches us that there's actually 4 elements to love. The first element is respect. If I don't respect you, I can never love you. And to respect means I create a space in my life for you, and I acknowledge that you are different from me. And yet I create a space in my life for somebody that is different than me. And then you have to give of ourselves to that person. And we have to allow that person to do the same for us. Let them create space in their life for us, and let them give to us and therefore be receptive to what they give. And that's the same formula in all relations, whether it's husband and wife, parents and children, children and parents, friends. It all really boils down to what we call shali shalach, shalach shalach. What is mine is yours, that's kindness. And what is yours is respect. I respect, I don't assume what is yours is mine, but I'm telling you, you can assume that what mine is yours. And those are the fundamental the elements of all relationship. It's loving and respecting.
So respect is so fundamental, and I definitely understand what you're saying, how important it is, because I think sometimes if you think of any relationship that's not in a very healthy or good place, it oftentimes is lacking, or there's a struggle with respecting the other person. The challenge is that because we're all so different, sometimes it can be, especially when someone is different from us. In some relationships we choose, like our spouse. In some relationships we don't choose, like who our parents are, or who our children are. So especially whether we've chosen a relationship, and even so it can be hard to sometimes find that sense of respect, or we haven't. When we're struggling with respect, how can we still bring the relationship to a healthy place of love?
Well, in our tradition, love is not a feeling. Action might generate a feeling, but it might not. But when we have a mitzvah to love your neighbor as yourself, the commandment is not commanding a feeling, because you can't turn a feeling off and on. So a commandment is an action. And therefore I have a commandment to act towards someone in a loving way. And if I don't feel that love in my heart, no problem. That's like, so what? You still act in a loving way. You're kind, you're considerate, you're helpful, and that's it. And and you might not feel tremendous love. They might annoy you very much, and they might, have very different values than you that you're very disturbed by. But still, you should act kindly and be helpful in whatever way you can. And of course, God forbid, never ever try to hurt them or to undermine them.
So, and what you're giving is a huge key, because we have a lot more, as you're saying, control over the way we act than we do necessarily in how we feel. And oftentimes it's also true that the way we act will affect how we feel, but even if it doesn't, we still have more of an ability to control our behavior than our feelings, which is really...
But even the other point I'm making is, even if we don't, you fulfill the mitzvah of loving your neighbor as yourself, because the fulfillment of the commandment is the action, not the feeling. If you don't get the feeling, okay, so you didn't get to the feeling. Nobody's, expecting you to turn a feeling on and off. Generally, though, when you are kind to somebody, you invest in them, you feel connected to them, and then feelings of love generally arise, but maybe not.
So in the husband-wife relationship, I definitely see the importance of respect and how that affects love. Siblings also, I think sometimes that's harder because, again, you didn't choose who your sibling's going to be, and if you have different kinds of personalities and natures, that can sometimes be challenging. But when it comes to a parent-child, a child is expected to honor and respect the parent. But if a parent's having a hard time connecting to a child, and we have this aspect of a parent, we have a parent, and even that in the Parsha now we have Yaakov and Esau and Jacob, and such different personalities. And sometimes this happens, different tendencies, that a parent's job is to try to educate and care for and take care of and hopefully love their child. But how can a parent, where we're not talking about maybe respect, how can they help themselves to connect more to a child if they're having that challenge?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Torah does not have a classic book on how to raise your children. In the entire Talmud, there is not a tractate about how to raise your children. And that's very interesting. You'd think that for sure that would be there. But the answer I received on that question is that really it's just the same principle. It's love your neighbor as yourself. Treat your children in a way that you would want to be treated. And it's just simple wisdom that sadly is, it should be common sense, but sometimes common sense is uncommon. And so, just like you wouldn't want somebody yelling at you in front of people. I remember, I probably shared this story years ago. I was at someone's home for Friday night dinner, and it was a very, very successful businessman. And he, at the dinner table, he turned to his son and said, Sammy, I would like you to share a few words of Torah. So the boy was embarrassed. He said, I have nothing to say, Daddy. So the father said, no, please, Rabbi Aaron is here. I would like you to honor him with a few words, ideas from this week's portion. And the son got even more uncomfortable. And he said, Daddy, I don't have anything to say. And then the father says in front of the son to everyone at the table, could you imagine that? I spend $25,000 a year on his education and I can't get a lousy, word of Torah from him Friday night. Now, what did the father think? Would the father want somebody to embarrass him in public? Would the father want somebody to talk in such a derogatory, insulting way? I mean, my guess is this kid has nothing to do with Judaism today, because just that experience alone would be enough to throw that kid out of the tradition. Because if Torah is identified with my father disrespecting me and insulting me and embarrassing me in public, then who needs it? And I was thinking to myself, this man is such a brilliant, brilliant businessman, but such a foolish father. And so it's a very simple recipe. How would you like someone to talk to you? How would you like someone to treat you? You don't like to be insulted. You don't want to be embarrassed. You don't want to be yelled at. You don't want to be hurt. Why would you think anybody else would? And why do you think that would be effective when it comes to your children? So it's it's surprisingly simple, but it's surprisingly not so common, always so common, that people are able to get outside themselves and say, hey, if I were my kid, how would I want my father to speak to me?
And that is the key element of being able to get outside of ourselves, because I think that is a challenge. And what you're sharing here is so important, because it reminds us of the importance of doing this. And I think also we sometimes complicate situations, and it seems so complicated. How am I going to handle the situation? But you're actually giving a very helpful formula, saying get outside of myself, of who I am, even just who I am at this stage of life. And I have to, again, go back, coming from a parent's perspective, but still even seeing myself as the child, and how would I want, and what would be the best advice for my parent to respond to me. And the beauty of this, too, is that you're coming from an adult perspective that a child might be lacking. But if we can put ourselves in the child's spot of recognizing how would it feel, if I'm yelled at versus I'm talked to versus, there's so many different ways that a situation can be responded to. But it still maintains.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'm sure I must have somewhere along the line of all our interviews shared this story, but it's so apropos. People don't realize like loving your neighbor as yourself really means loving your neighbor in the unique way, just like you want to be loved in the unique way that you need love. You need to figure out the unique way that they need to be loved. And I would like to, when we get to the next segment, I'd like to further explore that.
Okay, when we return, Soul Talk, Rabbi David Aaron and Leora Mandel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Tamar? She's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yona. And yes, I can be all of those things, but at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Hello and welcome back to Soul Talk. Leora Mandel talking with Rabbi David Aaron, talking about all the challenges that we can have in family relationships, and it can be between husband, wife, parent, child, parent, siblings. And Rabbi, you really simplified it for us in a way. I think sometimes situations feel like they're very complicated, and sometimes it does help to realize that ultimately it comes down to a simple formula. And what you really pointed out, the ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, the love your neighbor as yourself, is oftentimes most challenging with those closest to us. But it really comes down to respect. Having respect in the relationships and putting yourself almost in someone else's place, even as a parent. Sometimes even doing this and imagining that we're the child, how would I want to be responded to? And right before the break, you were going to share with us a story about understanding that each person is unique and how best to respond.
Right. Well, so I had a friend that was sadly in a terrible accident, and he was paralyzed. And he wasn't even able to feed himself. People had to feed him. And he told me something very interesting. He said that people often would not give him the cooked vegetables because they don't like cooked vegetables. He happens to like them. So he would have to remind them, please, could you give me a fork full of cooked vegetables? And people would reluctantly give him the vegetables they don't like, and they wouldn't go back to it. And he'd have to remind them, I like cooked vegetables, please, would you mind giving me some more? And he gave me a real understanding that people assume what they don't like, nobody likes. It's so amazing that we are not able to get outside ourselves and inside somebody else's head and realize that what I don't like, other people might really like, or maybe what I like, others don't like. So loving your neighbor as yourself doesn't mean to love them the way you like to be loved, but to love them just like you want to be loved in the new way that you need that love. You have to figure out what is the way they like to get love. And many, many years ago, when my wife and I, we went out to buy a dress, and well, we didn't find one for me, so we decided to see if we could find one for her. And so we're in the store, and it was the woman that owned the store actually designed many of the dresses there. And so my wife asked me to go through the racks and see if there's anything there that would, that I would suggest. So yeah, okay, I did that. I would pull out a dress and I'd show it to her, and I'd say, what about this one? And she'd go, oh, my gosh, that's not my color. I said, color? What does that mean, not your color? She said, no. So I went ahead and I pulled out another dress. I said, oh, I like this one. And she said, oh, my gosh, that is so not me. That's not my color. I said, I don't understand. You are wearing this dress for me. I like it. So what do you care? I'm the one who's going to see the dress, not so much you. She said, it's not my color. I said, who says you have a color? She said, talk to the owner of the store and show her the dress and ask her opinion. Okay, so I took the dress and I showed the owner of the store, and I said, what do you think about this dress? And she said, it'll be perfect on you. It's your color. And I said, well, I'm not looking for a dress for me. It's for my wife. She said, it's not her color. And I want you to know that every husband that comes in here does the same thing. He picks dresses that are his color and not his wife's color. And I learned such a lesson there, never to go shopping with my wife. That's what I learned. But other than that, I realized like it's so interesting. We are such masters of projecting what we like or what we think is right on everybody else. And really loving somebody is being able to create a space in your life and acknowledge them for who they are. And I think that's really hinted in the word respect, because the word spect is to see, like spectacle, inspect. Respect is like to return, to come back. And so I'm thinking maybe respect is you have to take a double look at somebody and don't assume you know them at first glance, but really look at them again and again, and don't assume that who you saw yesterday is the same person you see today. And that's what you need to do in terms of truly respecting something, is looking at them with fresh eyes and not projecting on them what you think is right for them, or assuming what's right for you is right for them.
So what you're saying is so important. And I'm thinking, again, in relationships that we choose, for example, again, a husband-wife, being able to, the example you're bringing is even exactly a husband-wife relationship. And even those relationships, we have to, again, work on ourselves to recognize this person isn't me and I'm not them. And I have to, if I'm giving to someone else and I'm right, I have to think of what is good for them, not just my perspective of what I want, if I'm really wanting to give to them and respect them. But especially in these relationships that we don't choose, again, like siblings, for example, I didn't choose who my brother is and choose the kind of personality of who I'm going to be living with growing up and dealing with as I'm an adult. So those relationships, to a degree, sometimes, all the more so, are sometimes even more challenging when it comes to recognizing that this person's just different than me, and I still have to figure out a way to get along. Most importantly, how to respect each other, especially when our interests and our personalities and traits might be so different. And you see this challenge tremendously in the Torah, specifically among siblings. I mean, the first set of siblings, Cain killed Abel. And then we have Ishmael and Yitzchak. It sounds like they have very different personalities to the extent, and that was also a challenge in the relationship of Sarah said Ishmael's got to go, and Avraham was reluctant, and God told him to listen to her voice. I feel like sometimes we need God in everyone's household to settle differences of opinion between husband and wife. And then you have Yaakov and Esav. Very different personalities and tendencies. Yaakov has to actually run away from his brother. And even the 12 sons of Yaakov, such different personalities. There was a tremendous amount of jealousy between them and Yosef. And what is helpful is this brings to light that anybody who has siblings or people in their life that they're having a challenge getting along with, it helps us understand that these have been challenges that families have been struggling for a very long time. The question is, how can we avoid the mistakes that some of these families have made and these sibling relationships, and restore that sense of respect even when they're so different?
Well, even before we would address that question, I want to address that question. I do want to point out that people should realize that this is the norm. In other words, that there should be challenges in a relationship is normal, because the theme of life is unconditional love. We have come here, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, to live the meaning of loving people, and true love at its in its epitome form is unconditional love. And unconditional love means that there are going to be conditions that will challenge my love, because if all the conditions for our love was in our favor, then when would we be able to really transcend and demonstrate the power of unconditional love? And so I think it's important to appreciate that when a person has a brother who's so different than them, and like, how annoying, why is it this way? Couldn't God have given me an easier brother? The answer is no, it's an opportunity. The challenge is an opportunity. It's like, if you look at life with an attitude that Hashem only loves us and only wants to help us grow, and you think of Hashem like a loving coach who's taking an athlete and is putting him through, very difficult exercises and having him, struggle with some, serious obstacles, the athlete doesn't think the coach hates him. The athlete actually knows that the coach loves him and is devoted to him and is invested in him and wants him to win. And so when a person has that attitude, they have to first start off with the only way I think the first step in really creating a healthy relationship with the challenging people in your family is to realize that that challenge is an opportunity for demonstrating unconditional love. And if a person begins with this attitude that this is an opportunity, then I believe they will find the opportunity. But if they start off with this is an annoyance, then it'll just stay an annoyance.
I'm thinking about this really in the larger perspective of a lot of what we talk about in terms of what is the purpose of man being on this earth. And it is so interesting that there's so many commandments that have to do with human relationships. In fact, God promotes us and wants us to get married, have children, have families. Part of the 10 Commandments is respecting parents. It's talking about relationships. And what you're saying here is understanding that it's the challenge, just like in life, the challenges are what bring out my potential. Without them, I'm not necessarily, there's nothing for me to work on and perfect. There's no choices for me to make. But what's very interesting is it really takes even the challenging relationships that we have and gives a different perspective, because it's the challenges themselves, as you're sharing, that's really the opportunity. Because if what I'm here for is to work on myself, then those relationships that challenge me enable me, as you're saying too, to really show unconditional love. If I'm not challenged, then my liking my brother, so to speak, doesn't mean that much, because there's nothing that challenges me not to like him.
Yes, the challenge is really the glue of a relationship, of a deep relationship. Many, many years ago, my wife had studied astrology, and there's different opinions about astrology and Jewish law, but everybody agrees that you can't use it for telling the future. My wife didn't do that. But there are opinions that you can use it to help people understand their personalities. My wife actually doesn't do it anymore. But so when a woman came to her and asked her, to take a look at the guy that she's dating and considering for marriage and look at her astrological chart and his astrological chart and see if they are fitting, if they're compatible. And my wife said, I won't do that. And she said, why not? She said, because let's say I'll just see a lot of challenges here. That could be actually that's a gift. Why? So we're not looking to see that this will be a smooth relationship, because a smooth relationship is probably not much of a relationship at all. Because when do we really get a chance to see each other and really include each other and be patient for each other and show up in the way that the other needs it? If everything is so smooth and easy and so. I think when people expect, we were recently guiding some fellow in dating, and I said to him, I want you to date not with the attitude to see if this could work out, but with the attitude of seeing if you could make this work. And he's already pretty on in his age, and he's met a lot of women. And I said, maybe it's time to take a different approach. See if you can make this work.
Wow. And that is the perspective we go into any relationship is key to what degree it will work or not, based on even the perspective we have when we're entering it. When we return, Soul Talk, Rabbi David Aaron and Leora Mandel.
In a time where feelings have become fact, where rational thought and common sense has disappeared, one man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobiker, your political hitman.
Political Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome back to Soul Talk. Leora Mandel with Rabbi David Aaron. And Rabbi Aaron, we're talking about here relationships and the challenges of relationships that we have in our life, specifically different kinds of family relationships. And already you're really changing perspective here, because I think so many of us would think, well, everything would be great if we didn't have these challenges. It would be nice if we could see eye to eye more, if we got along more, if there was nothing to ruffle our feathers, if only we had similar perspectives on life. But the reality is what you're showing is that it's the challenges that are an opportunity for growth, but also to really show that I love this person because I love you even though we don't see it eye to eye. I can show respect to you even though I disagree with you. And that's true respect, because it's respect not just from, well, of course I respect what you're saying. I agree with you. Even if I don't agree with you, having that sense of respect. And that respect really is such a core element of any relationship. Now, in the last segment, I want to ask you specifically about a trait that seems to really run through the relationships in the Torah, and that is the challenge of jealousy. You have wives jealous of each other, siblings jealous of each other. And in a sense, I think the antidote is respect, because if we can respect someone else, then it feels like it would be hard to say you'd be jealous of someone else if you respect them. But this does seem to be a core element. So how do we how can we transform, if we do have jealousy, how can we transform that more into respect?
Well, I heard it put very well by another teacher, and he pointed out that jealousy is when we're not on the same team. You know, if I'm playing basketball and I'm short, and there's a guy on the other team that he's tall, and I'm jealous of this tall guy. But let's say he's on my team. I won't be jealous of him because we're on the same team, so I'm really happy that he's tall because I benefit from that. So when we see each other as competitors, well, then there's jealousy. But when we see each other as partners, then there's no jealousy. I'm very happy that you have your strength, and you're very happy that I have my strength. And I don't need to have what you have because you have it, and we're working together. And so it's all about how can we view each other on the same team and not competitors. And that's the point. You know, we have to see each other not competing with each other, but completing each other.
Wow, this is so key, and it really ties into everything that you're sharing. Meaning, I think human relationships feel so complicated when they're in the midst of a challenge, but you're really simplifying it, and it all comes back. Even the specific situation of jealousy comes back to my perspective. Meaning, if I'm in a perspective of, I see you're different than me, but it's not a threat to me. It's actually potentially you have certain strengths that I don't have, and since again, if you're on my team, we're on a team together, then therefore we're going to help each other because we're all going towards the same cause. But you have your way of going about it and I have my way of going about it, but I can leave room for you. It doesn't have to always be my way. Then you're not a threat to me. And then there's no need for me to feel jealous. If anything, as you're saying, I feel proud. I can feel respect and feel grateful that you're on my team.
Right. Rav Kook says that thank God God gave everybody different talents so that we could work together. And so having different talents was meant so that we could work together, not fight with each other. And I think it really starts with not respecting the other, but respecting ourselves. You see, jealousy is very often emerging out of low self-worth. Because I don't feel good about myself, I constantly look at why this person is so much better than me. But if I felt good about myself and I was, involved with what I need to do, I have no interest in looking at what he's doing or what she's doing. It generally happens at a time when we're not feeling good about ourselves and we're not really busy enough at what we're doing. And then we start wasting our time looking at what they're doing and how great they are at what they're doing. And so it really doesn't even start with respecting other people. It starts with respecting yourself. This is who I am, and I'm good enough. But when people feel bad about themselves, they become even more aware of how great everybody else is.
What's so interesting is I think in any relationship when there's a challenge, we are often get very focused on the other person. And what you're sharing here is that the beauty of what you're sharing is it feels like also if the other person isn't willing to change, then how is this relationship going to change? But here what you're saying is that I can really look to myself and say, wait a minute, if I'm having a challenge with this person, am I feeling confident in myself? Am I feeling comfortable with myself? And it's a lot of self-work. And when I work that out, then my perspective on them and their role in my family and my connection to them will oftentimes be very different. And instead of feeling threatened or angered or upset, when I do that self-work, my whole perspective changes, even if their behavior isn't going to change.
Yeah, the best way to destroy yourself is to compare yourself to somebody else. And why would I compare myself to somebody else? That's because somehow I think we're in the same league. But that's as stupid as if I were an apple and I was jealous of a pair of eyeglasses. Like, what's there to compare? We have nothing to do with each other. So I think people, because they think, well, we're all people, that somehow there's something to compare. There's nothing to compare. We're all completely unique, and we've all been given exactly what we need in order to fill our mission in life. And when I look at other people and I'm jealous of their mission, that I so totally disrespect my mission. And so if a person would just really be more immersed in what they're doing and spend more time contemplating what they should be doing, I think they'll have less time and less interest in looking at what everybody else is doing.
You know, it is so important, especially when we can be secure within what and recognize that I have a role and someone else has a role that might be different, but it doesn't have to threaten me. I think a lot of times in relationships, siblings, it can be also even in marriage, where there's almost like these power struggles of one person that tends to be the more dominant, more stronger force, and the other person that might be more easygoing, but it can be taken advantage of. I think you can see this a lot in siblings. But this perspective is important, just as a practical example, when these situations come up, because it doesn't have to be with a right or wrong. That perspective is going to create jealousy, disrespect, and it's going to create tension, as opposed to saying you're not right for being more assertive and maybe being a bit more aggressive. I'm not wrong for being a person who's rather, let things flow, or just different kind of personality. It's just this is part of who you are. This is part of who I am. You have a different mission. I have a different mission. The question is, how can we each respect each other, or if I can't even control you respecting me, how can I work on having a sense of respect for the skills, the traits, and the strengths that you have, even if I don't always see eye to eye with you? But because, again, when it goes back to me being able to work on myself, that is really when the relationship has the power to change.
I think generally when people hate other people, it's really because they hate themselves. Because if you felt good about yourself, then you wouldn't need to or be drawn into these kind of negative things. And really, there's a lot of work to do in terms of just parenting ourselves, because some of us didn't get such a great experience with our parents, and we didn't get the love that we were hoping to get. So then we have to give that to ourselves. If we grew up and we weren't, it's like my mother-in-law, when she was in her 50s, she went out and bought herself a doll because she grew up in a poor home. She lost her mother at a very young age. Her father remarried to a woman that was very, very mean to the stepchildren. And so later on in her life, she realized that she never had a doll, and she bought herself a doll. I think that's very healthy and very beautiful. And I think that we need to be more self-compassionate and treat ourselves well and begin there. And so if we are being drawn into this negativity towards other people, I personally think that it most of the time starts off because we just don't feel good about ourselves. And so we start wasting our time looking at everybody else.
But being drawn in is the key word to really recognize that this is what happens. We get drawn into something and it's sucking us in, and we have to pull out, because sometimes it's just a matter of perspective. When you're in the midst of something, it seems so huge, so important, so complicated, so problematic. This person's never going to change, and it's on and on and on. But sometimes being able to pull back and get perspective and a new way of thinking about the situation, and then even recognizing that, wait, I'm so focused on them and the problems. Why don't I look at why is this bothering me so much? Because it is so interesting. I think we've all had times where you can be with a friend or a spouse and something's aggravating you, and it just flows off. I hear that, but it doesn't upset them. And that really just goes to show that, is it the event? Is it the person? Is it the trait of that other person? Or is it maybe just for some reason, I have to do, as you're saying, self-reflection and looking at myself and saying, what is it within me that this is irritating me so much? And how can I change the way I'm thinking about the situation? Maybe what care do I need to give to myself that I'd feel better about myself, and then this wouldn't bother me as much.
Right. But what if this person actually does something nasty towards you? How do you continue to love them when that happens? And I think, first of all, ask yourself, do you really believe they intended to hurt you? Because very often when we get hurt, we don't ask that question, well, did the person actually want to hurt us? And very often I think we know they didn't. And if we really do believe they did, then rather than getting angry and hating them, feel sorry for them and have compassion that they are obviously so, unhealthy that they would hurt somebody intentionally. Imagine how much they must hate themselves if the way they treat others is this way. And so I believe that only people that are hurting other people. And so rather than say, oh my gosh, this person hurt me, why not say, oh my gosh, this person must be hurting so much that they would do something like this. How sad. Now, that doesn't mean you hang around them. You do have to protect yourself. But when you hate another person, that's like, drinking poison and hoping somebody else is going to die. It's like just living with the hatred is only hurting you. They don't even know you hate them very often. And so, loving other people in many ways is a gift to yourself.
And living with other people is really a way to help us get to know ourselves better. That's what you're showing us here too. And especially it gives us an opportunity to learn what it means to really love unconditionally. And we have to love ourselves unconditionally as well. And to really get to know ourselves, parts of ourselves that we wouldn't get to know, and develop parts of ourselves we would not get to develop if we weren't in these relationships. I want to thank you all for joining us. Soul Talk, Rabbi David Aaron and Leora Mandel.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicoleko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.